6. We're going to finish out the book of Galatians today, starting in verse 1. Brethren, if someone is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks himself to be something, then he is nothing. He deceives himself. But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone, and not in another. For each one shall bear his own load. Let him who is taught the word share in all good things with him who teaches. Do not be deceived. God is not to be mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. For he who sows to the flesh will of the flesh reap corruption. But he who sows to the Spirit will be of the Spirit. When he sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. And let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. Therefore, as we have the opportunity, let us do good to all, especially to those who are in the household of the Lord. This is the word of God for the people of God. We give thanks to God for his word today. This is the continuation of Paul's letter to the people of Galatia. We've been kind of walking through this book since Easter and recognizing that Paul's got a lot to still teach us. He's still teaching us today with these words. This was a letter to the people of Galatia. Remember, they were the people that were trying to form this new Christian church and this new Christian way of believing. They were the people from the Jewish tradition and the people from the non-Jewish tradition and anybody else in between. We're all trying to come together to try to sort this thing out. And they were messing it up. Now, like we've talked about in our world today, we've got all sides trying together to come together to figure this thing called life out, and we mess it up still today. So that's why we call this Bible thing the living word, because it's just as important today as the day it was written. It's living. It's still living within us. And so Paul is helping the Galatian folks know, as he comes to the end of his letter, that I've taught you all you need to know. Now you need to go and do it. Last week we talked about the fruit of the Spirit and about how the world goes against what the Spirit wants. And then we talked about the flesh being weak, but if you're bound in the Spirit, then you've got all that you need to counteract against the temptations. And then he brings it up again here in this chapter to kind of reinforce that teaching. And many of you that are teachers, you know you've got to teach that concept over and over and over again, and eventually it's going to sink in. But we can't just hear something once and it sticks. We got to hear things over and over and over again. So he's telling us over and over again, don't lose heart. There's the world, but there's also the Spirit. And so that's what he's kind of helping us to understand today. He uses it in a way of reaping what we sow. I mean, many of you are planters, you're farmers, you have planted your share of crops. You know what it takes to plant a good crop. It has to have all the right ingredients, the right sunshine, the right soil, the right water, the right seeds. Because you know, if it doesn't plant well, it's not going to grow well, is it? And that's what Paul's wanting to use that imagery as he's helping us to understand his message today. He starts out by saying, don't be deceived. I got my papers all mixed up here. Helps if I have my papers in the right order, right? He's telling us to go about doing what is right. And that if we go about doing what is right, we won't have to worry about what is wrong. The other part of what he was trying to help them to understand is that the Jewish tradition came from that list of 617 laws in the book of Deuteronomy. But Jesus changed all that. Yes, those rules are still important. But if we're still focused only on the rules of life, we are not going to be living in the Spirit, right? We talked last week about the debauchery, about adultery, about fornication, about those lists of 7 sins that he listed. But then he said, the fruit of the Spirit of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, that if we are living within the Spirit, living within that love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, then we're not going to want to do the other. And that's what Paul's trying to reiterate again, that if we are going to walk in the Spirit, we're not going to want to do anything else. But we all know that there are people, including ourselves, who fall short of that. All have fallen short of the glory of God, right? We're all sinners. There ain't a single person in here that's perfect. Myself included. When I mess things up, I expect others to hold me accountable to that. But when I want somebody to hold me accountable to the things that I'm doing wrong, I don't need somebody going, you know you should, da-da-da-da-da, right? That's not going to make me want to change. That's going to make me angry, right? We've all been there. We've all done that. Paul says that we are to help one another with gentleness. And I think back of the stories of Jesus when he was here on the earth and he would come across somebody who was sinning and not doing what they should be doing. Did you ever hear anywhere in the Bible of Jesus? The only time Jesus really got angry was in the temple when he turned the tables over. And that was for the whole group, not just for a single couple of people. Jesus never threw a finger at you. Any of the people that he dealt with. Instead, what did Jesus do? Often he would go off to pray. Often he would sit with those people and just have a meal with them. Talk to them. Get to know them. And then if he needed to teach, he wouldn't come at them individually. He would teach the whole crowd because I guess he thought there was probably somebody else out there in that crowd that needed to hear that same message. He never once pointed anybody out. Said, you're messing up. Even in the Last Supper, when he knew Judas was going to betray him, when he knew Peter was going to betray him, not once around that Last Supper table did he say, Judas, I know what you're going to do is wrong, and call him out in front of everybody. Said he just quietly said, go do what you need to go and do. Gentleness. Oh, to be as gentle as Jesus. But Paul also reminds us that in the midst of that, we are not to be tempted. When we are walking along someone else who's having a rough time, we're not to fall into their patterns of behavior. It's easy to want to just join in instead of standing up for what is right. We fall so easily to temptation when we hear things and then we see things. So I don't want you, from now on, for the rest of the day, I don't want you to think about pink flamingos. No matter what you do not think about pink flamingos, all right? So don't be thinking about it. Are you thinking about them? Are you thinking about a pink flamingo right now? No, don't think about a pink flamingo. Because that's not the message today. The message today is not about pink flamingos. It's about Jesus. But there's a pink flamingo in your head right now. But what if instead, I told you there was an ice cream sundae in front of you? Chocolate, vanilla ice cream, little bananas, and chocolate and butterscotch syrup on top, sprinkles, maybe a banana and a couple of cherries. Are you thinking about a pink flamingo anymore? Oh no. You're thinking about ice cream. You see how easy it is to lose track of what you're thinking about? I said pink flamingo and immediately thought about a pink flamingo even though I had just been talking about Jesus. And even though we were thinking about pink flamingos, as soon as you put the temptation of a sundae in front of you, well, that changed it again, didn't it? We are so easily tempted by what other people say that we lose track of what we should be thinking about. So what was my message about before I mentioned pink flamingos? Jesus. That's the right answer. That's the easy answer. But it was about approaching people with gentleness. Approaching people with gentleness. Paul goes on to teach about listening to those who want to have something to say. But often his very words here says, for those who are nothing think that they are something, but they only deceive themselves. All must test their own work, and then that work, rather than their neighbor's work, will cause pride. For all must carry their own loads. Those can be some heavy words. But what Paul wants us to recognize is that when we're trying to help somebody else, it's not for us to go and say, hey, well, here's how I think you should solve this problem. Or here's what I would do in this situation. Or here's what happened to me. When you are going through a hard time, sometimes the last thing you want to hear is what somebody else has gone through. What that person wants more than anything is just to be heard. It's just to allow their voices to be heard and to allow somebody to just listen. Because we all must carry our own loads. That's very important in Paul's message. But then he also says in that same set of scriptures that we are to carry one another's burdens. So which is it? Are we supposed to carry our own loads, or are we supposed to carry one another's burdens? What's the answer? Both. I know people when working in addiction and working with mental health that there are people that come and say, I can't handle this on my own, I'm not dealing with anything. You take care of me. And they become dependent upon others, and they can't think for themselves anymore. They don't want to do anything for themselves anymore. They become a burden to somebody else because they don't want to look and make themselves right again. But God tells us through Paul that we are to carry our own load. We have to be accountable to ourselves. We have to make the steps to make things right with God. But on the flip side of that, is that when that burden becomes too heavy to carry, to ask for help, that's when the carry one another's burdens come in. That when our load becomes too heavy on our own, we ask somebody to help. I mean, there's a lot of things I can't pick up. My poor husband's like, could you go unload this car because I can't pick it up and carry it. It's too big of a load for me. But there are things in my life, too, that when I've struggled with things, I couldn't do it on my own. I needed some help. I needed somebody to come alongside and to help me, listen to me, care for me, and be gentle with me. I didn't need anybody pointing a finger at me and saying, this is what you're doing wrong. I just needed somebody to come alongside and love me, show compassion. Because, you know, when we get to that place up there in heaven, God's going to hold us accountable for all the things that we've done. When nobody else needs to do that. We don't need to hold one another accountable. God will do that. But we need to come alongside one another and walk with them and nurture them and show compassion and love and gentleness. Those fruit of the Spirit, that love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control, that's what we are to show with one another. So Paul ends this letter and is teaching to these Galatian people to remind them that you are all going to face burdens. You don't have to face them alone. But you also have to do the work to make things right with God so that then you can then help somebody else in the future. Because when we go through our burdens and we come out on the other side, we're then better able to walk alongside with somebody else who's struggling with life. And isn't that what this Christian faith is all about? It's not walking life alone, learning from our mistakes, but also go out and sharing with one another. That's what we're called to be. And we have a God of grace and a God of glory that helps us along the way. So we're going to sing that hymn today as we close off today. God of grace and God of glory.